Hello, it's me, and we're going to navigate our way through this shepherd's cube. This is a very interesting modification because it's not a shape modification. As you can see, it's a sticker modification, which really converts it into a supercube. But just because it's not a shapeshifter doesn't mean it won't find its own challenge, a very unique challenge as well. This is actually from a normal 3x3 Rubik's Cube. I got the stickers from Oliver Nagy and basically took the stickers off the native cube and applied these. I applied these in the classic shepherd cube pattern. You may want to look up online exactly what that is, but we'll go over what that pattern is, just to keep it, keep it pure in terms of what a shepherd's cube is. Now the use of arrows instead of colors, like in this classic gentleman over here, does give it a very interesting twist, and it seems kind of difficult at first, but we're going to see how we can tame this and kind of bring it down a little bit. What we want to do is let's get our orientation. We can't orient in terms of colors, we have to do it based on arrows. So let's see how we can do this. The way that I like to orient my puzzles, my cubes, is the sides that I tend to move the most, the ones that I feel the most comfortable with, are the front side, the tops, the up side, and the right side. Left side I do when I need to. Back side I almost never use unless I'm doing Red Bull algorithms, parity algorithms, and the downside tends to be something that also is used pretty sparingly. So just to make it make sense, I'm going to coordinate this to where the pattern that I have consistently with up, top, with front, up, and right is the arrows pointing, leading me to a clockwise rotation. So as you can see over here, this goes up, this goes to the right, and this comes out at me. So this forges a clockwise rotation. So that's how I'm going to orient myself, and this is how I'm going to look at things. The thing to notice as well is that everything that's on the opposite will have the arrows going in the opposite direction. So you can see this is facing to the right, so on the downside it's facing to the left. This is facing up, so on the back side it's facing down. Here it's facing towards me to the front, so these arrows on the other side are facing to the left. So that's a good way of orienting yourself. Now, in order to be able to solve this more easily and consistently, it's also important to understand the organization of how these little cubies act. So one thing that you should notice right away is that these corner cubes, to the corner here and the corner here, have very unique properties. And they follow almost in a fractile way the same organization of the cube in general, which means that this little one has the arrows that are pointing in this clockwise rotation, up, to the right, and towards me. That's what this entire part is doing. This also has the characteristic that anytime I rotate this cube, this piece over here, it's always going to look the same. If I were to take this piece over here and I rotate this around, obviously it's going to look different. Red is going to be here, blue is going to be here, white's going to be here. The unique thing about this puzzle is this cube is going to look the same. Imagine if I rotate this in a clockwise way, this will come up here and this arrow will be rotated clockwise, pointing the same way. This will be rotated clockwise here, pointing this way, and this will be rotated here and pointing up. So this has that characteristic. It's the only one that does that, but it's not the only one that's the same on all rotations. This one is the same also, but it's facing the opposite way. So if I turn this here, notice this forges a counterclockwise rotation, and it has that same characteristic. So I'm going to come back over here. So both of these share that property where they forge a specific rotation of the arrows, and it's the same in any orientation. So let's take a look at the other cubes, the other small pieces here too. These two share an interesting characteristic with each other in that they're the same. They're homologous. That's not like this puzzle where everything is different. These two are actually the same. Even though they look like they're oriented different, it's just because, well, they are oriented different. But you can prove that to yourself by remembering that this arrow on this side is facing the right, and this is up, and this is back. If I go like this and this, you can see this is the same, to the right, up, and back. And that's not just a coincidence. I can't do that with any of the other components. So these two are the same. They're homologous, which means that you can potentially falsely equivocate these two. And you can potentially falsely equivocate the position with this, thus leading to a fallacy of false equivocation and apparent break in the usual parity that happens with the 3x3. So we have to bear that in mind. This plays by its own rules. It's the only unique one that's here. The bottom layer follows the same suit. So you've got this over here, which has rotational symmetry, just like this piece. Then you have these two pieces, which are equivalent pieces as well, and this, which is in a class by itself. So that's going to be helpful, because anytime you see apparent breaks with parity, parity just referring to the combinations and permutations that are allowed for the solved state, unless you pluck it out or reduce from an even to an odd. If you seem to see something that appears to break with that parity, then it's really, in this case, not that kind of parity at all. It's a fallacy, a false equivocation, where you're taking one piece and confusing it for another, or rotation confusing for another. What do I mean by that? Well, let's check it out. So what I'm going to do is, with all that known, we're going to go ahead and scramble this and see how well we can solve it. So let's take it to a solve. Abracadabra. Okay, so we've got arrows pointing every which way. We don't know which end is up or down or anywhere in between. You know, why don't we scramble this one too, so that we can kind of parallel what we do with one versus another. So we'll do a secondary alakazam. Okay, very good. Parallel scrambles. So what I'm going to do is, this first part is pretty easy. Here we have very specific places where the colors are supposed to go. Here I can define these sides as anything right now. So I'm going to just orient the arrows in the configuration that I've defined, as will be my front, top, and to the right. So this will be up. This is going to be facing to the left, the right rather, which it already is, and this is going to be facing towards me. So here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the opposite sides. So if this is facing towards me, this is going to be facing the opposite way, like so. If this is facing up, this is going to be facing down, like so. If this is going to the left, this is going to go to the right, like so. But I really don't care about this bottom layer here right now. This is going to be my wild card. This is what I'm going to be used to put everything where it needs to be. So I had to define that, unlike I did over here. It's already defined for me. So the first step is, of course, putting the edges in and getting my cross. So that's like what we saw here, and it's easy to see. You know, you can see here's a green and white, so move this to the bottom, put this to the white one. I usually start off with the green side. Force of habit, I guess. Who knows why? I'm a mystery unto myself sometimes. Okay, so bang, and you can see pretty straightforward over here. Now, how do I translate this onto here? Well, it's actually just as straightforward in its own way. I know that whatever edge is supposed to go here, it's the arrow is going to be facing up, and this arrow is going to be facing to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan for all upward arrows at the top part here first. I see this is facing up, but I can already see it's wrong. This isn't up, this isn't up, and this isn't up. If I can't find it immediately here, then I'm going to search the bottom. But what I have to search with the bottom is opposite. So instead of looking for ones facing up like this, I'm going to have to find ones that are facing down. And the reason for that is that I'm going to turn it up here and it's going to be facing opposite. So that's not down, that's not down, that's down. So it's a contender. Let's move it in line and see if it works. Well, if this is down, then I have to make sure that this is facing the opposite way of this so that I can turn it up, and you can see it's not. So this is not the correct one. Any other downs? Nope, no other downs. So if I can't find it here, then I'm going to have to identify it over to here. So I'm going to move certain pieces down from this layer down to here and see if it still qualifies based on, you know, my criteria of facing down. This one, well, no, because I put this, that's not down. I move it here, that's not down over here. How about this one? No, here, that's not down. Here, that's not down, so not this one. How about this? Nope. And nope, which leaves this. If I turn this here, that's not down. If I turn this here, that is down. So I'm going to turn this here, bring it to the layer, move it to the side, and quickly move this back up. So let's get our orientation. So what I did is I found, actually I've got two here that are facing down. I've already looked at that one. So how about this one? Well, this is facing down, opposite to what we want up here, which is fine when it gets moved. And now I have to make sure that the arrow is facing this way down here so that it can be this way when I move it up, and lo and behold it is. So that's how I can pretty systematically discover which is supposed to come into here. So I'm going to move this to the side out of the way, double turn this, move it in so this is lined up, and then move it up. And as you can see, we're fine over here. So now I'm just going to go to the next side here. Well, we're lucky. This is already in. Didn't plan it that way, but there it is. Sometimes that'll happen. The other thing to keep in mind is you're going to have two edges that are the same, so it's not hard to find these things. It might seem like I'm fishing, but really not. So now I'll come over here. This is facing down, so I'm going to scan up here for anything facing up. Well, there's this, anything facing down rather, and I don't see it here. So I scan down here for anything facing up. Not this, not this, not this, and not this. So once again, we have to borrow from this side over here. Well, if I turn this down, this faces up. So let's just move it in and see what happens. Not only does this have to face up, but the arrow that's down here has to be facing the opposite here to the right. Does it? Yeah. So I'm going to move it across here so I know it's the right one. So just to reiterate that, when I look for the piece up here, it has to be completely congruent with these arrows. If I'm looking for it down here, then it has to be opposite. So this is in, and now we're left with this. Okay, so this is facing to the left. I know it's not going to be up here because they're in, so I'm going to find an arrow down here where it's facing to the right. Here, no, here, yeah. This is facing to the right, and I see this arrow is facing this way, which is going to be the same actually. So it's not this. Here's another one facing right, and this arrow is facing the correct way, which is back. So even if I turn this upside down, it still has to face back. So I can tell this arrow is correct because when I move it up, this will now be rotated. So I turn this here, double turn it down, move it in. As you can see, it's lined up nice, and move it up. Okay, so this is fine. So you can see I've got the cross. We'll check our work. Good, 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 and good. So we've just done the equivalent to this. Now the next step, as I'm doing my layer by layer, quote, beginner's method, is to put corners in. Now this is pretty easy to see over here. You just match the colors to where they're supposed to be. This is the step in the Rubik's Cube solve that doesn't take much time unless I lose track of what I'm doing because I'm talking too much. Red and yellow. So this comes here and here. And finally, this comes here. So you can see quite easy over here. Maybe a little more tricky over here. So here's what I would start off with. Let's find the one that's easiest to find. We talked about the fact that we're running clockwise from front up and to the left. So let's find that edge that's very unique. It's the only one that's going to be unique and easy to find actually, and that's this one. So this is the clockwise. So let's move this down. And now let's wheel this into the proper place, which is here. So it's already lined up here. Now this can be in any configuration up here, so I'm just going to move it in any old way. So now you can see this is here. Go to the next edge. Now you may think that there's a lot of edges that I have to search for, but in reality there are two corners that it can fit in here. So although I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to choose from, I have a 2 7th chance of finding it. So maybe it's this one. So I'm going to start with this and see if this is actually the right one, but just oriented wrong. If I were to rotate this whole thing counterclockwise, all of these arrows are going to come down and similarly rotate counterclockwise, which means that this arrow will come up and be facing the right way. This arrow will come down here and not be facing the right way. So this isn't it. This is the wrong one. So I'm just going to arbitrarily find another one here. How about this? Well, I know this can't be correct because none of these arrows can ever be facing down. So I'll just find another one. And it's all fairly arbitrary. How about this? Well, if this rotates clockwise, this arrow will be facing down. This, rather counterclockwise, this will come up here and rotate counterclockwise, so it'll be facing down. This will come here and rotate counterclockwise, so it'll be facing this way. And this will be facing down. So I know this is correct. I just have to orient it. So I'm going to basically take it out and just orient it until it's where it needs to be. So now this corner's in. So we're good. Same thing over here. Now as I'm doing this, my fishing is going to get less and less and less and less. And it just so happens this happens to be in. And that's going to happen more often than you might think. Move over to here. Could this corner be in? Because I only have, what, 5 to choose from now. only 4 after this. If I were to rotate this, can any of these arrows ever end up pointing up? And the answer is no, none of these are. So it could be any one of these. So I'm just going to randomly pick one. Okay, you can see this arrow is facing up, but these don't match. What if I were to rotate this? Well, if I rotate this counterclockwise, this will come up here and rotate counterclockwise, and this will be facing up. This will rotate counterclockwise as it comes down here and facing this way. This will rotate counterclockwise and be facing up. So see how quickly I was able to find this corner piece here just by visualizing what's happening to these arrows as I rotate this. So I'm just going to rotate this into place, and you can see fairly easily I got that. So I have my first layer here. The next step when doing a layer by layer solve, of course, is to turn it upside down and put the corners, put these edges in. This is an edges only layer. And this is done by that simple algorithm of taking this, moving from here down to here. And that's going to be, if I want to move here to here, from the front to the left side, UI, LI, U, L, U, F, UI, FI, and that'll take that down here. And then I just do the opposite one if I have to move it to the other side. So this comes down here. Alright, boy, this takes me back. And this comes down here, so they all seem to be the left-sided version of this algorithm. Thing about the 3x3 is it's all just algorithm, very little strategy, which is why you tire. You can tire from this fairly quickly. This comes down here. And seek the mods, and seek the supercubes, and seek all the other patterns and shapes. So that's how we do that. Here's the same. We just have to expand our horizons a little bit and do a little bit of visualization. So we're not going to be able to know exactly what's going to go where, except have the faith that 2 possible edges can come over to here. So it's going to be fairly easy to find. Anyway, this is our top side here. So I'm going to turn this upside down like we did and see what goes where. So here's how I would do it. This is already in, so we can move past that. Just got lucky there. How about here? Well, if I were to start, I'm going to start off with this and ask myself, what's going to happen if this moves down here? Well, I like what will happen with this arrow. It'll end up pointing this way. This will end up pointing up, just like this. So I know this is supposed to come into here. So I'm going to do the right-sided version of the algorithm, which is U, R, UI, RI, U, FI, UI, F. So that moves that over there. So we move on. Okay, this is not where it needs to be. How about this? Well, if I move this down here, this will be pointing wrong. But I don't leave it. Just because this isn't where it's supposed to be here, I take this edge and I move it to the next side and see if it'll work over here if I move it this way. And the answer is no. So it's none of these. So now I'm going to move this over here and see what happens with this one. Well, if this comes down, I like the fact that this arrow will end up pointing up, and this will end up pointing this way, so this does go over here. So, do the algorithm, and bang, it's here. Simple as that. So how about here? Well, if this comes down here, obviously it's going to be bumping heads. But before I move on, let's move it over here and see what happens. Well, this isn't going to work here either, because if this comes here, this will be pointing and T-bone this one. So forget about it. Move back over here. Same thing will happen with this. But let's move it over here and see what happens. Same thing. How about this one? Nope. This will be facing down. Move it to this side. And same thing. How about here? Well, this will come down here and be pointing the right way. This will come down here and be pointing down, so that's correct. Turn, 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 and turn. Okay, so we basically have our second layer, just based on looking and visualizing what was happening. Now the last layer, just to review, if I were to cause a homologous look from one to the other, is the first thing that we need to do is we need to flip these edges. To flip these edges, we look to see what's already flipped and what's not. And we don't have any. And you're going to have 3 perspective patterns: the dot, the L, or the line. This is the dot, but the algorithm is the same. F, R, U, R, I, U, I, F, I. We actually have an L now. Ignore this. If you have the L, turn it like this to where you have one of your solved sides to the left, and the other one can be here if it's the L, or here if it's the line. F-R-U-R-I-U-I-F-I. And 100% of the time you'll end up with a line after the L. Do it once more and it'll all be fine. F-R-U-R-I-U-I-F-I. So you have all of your edges in. All of your edges flipped. The next step is to permute your edges to the proper color sequence. Did it just happen to do it? This is here, this is here, this is here, this is here. If it didn't happen to do that, then what you're going to have to do is find one where it fits, and then you can rotate the rest all around until they come to where they need to be. U, R, I, U, R to U, R, I. So that's in. That's not in. I'm going to keep doing that until this is in. R, U, R, I, U, R to U, R, I. These two are in, and these guys are fine. So, how do I do it with this monster? It's easier than you think. First thing I have to do is decide what's flipped upside down, what's flipped right side up, and that's going to take a little bit of cognitive play here. Well, let's just look at these arrows and see what would happen if they were supposed to be where they're supposed to be. The first thing that I would do, though, is let's make sure that this is oriented. When solving the last layer, which is the payoff layer of the mods, this is really the challenging layer, you want to make sure that your center is oriented correctly. Didn't have to worry about that with this puzzle. Have to with this one. So here it's got to be opposite this. So if this was my up, this is down. So this is oriented correctly. If this were to be, well, let's take a look at this. Is this correct? And yes, because this is facing up, this is here. I know this is rotated correct. Rather, this is flipped correctly. How about this? Well, this could also be correct, because if this were to come over here where this arrow lines up, this is still up. So they both can't be rotated correctly. One of them has to be wrong. So we're going to leave that go and say either this is correct or this is correct. But they can't both be correct. How about this? Well, this one can come across here too. You have to find out where this arrow can line up with this. Both of these, actually all three of these, all are vying for a position over here. These two are top contenders, but if this one comes across here, you've got this arrow facing down, which is opposite this. So I know for absolute certainty that this doesn't belong in this orientation. This is flipped wrong. How about this? Well, this comes over here. This arrow, when it lines up here, this is down, which lines up with this. So I know that this is flipped correctly. It's not permuted correctly. It's not where it needs to be, but it is flipped correctly. So what that means is this is correct, and one of these two are correct, which means I either have an L or a line. Which one is it? Well, let's experiment. I'm going to say it's a line, because now the next time I do the F-R-U-R-I-U-I-F-I, everything should be rotated correct. F-R-U-R-I-U-I-F-I. So let's see if it actually worked. Well, this is fine here. This can come over to here, and this is still fine. This can come up here, and this is fine because this will come up here and the arrow is pointing the right way. This is pointing to the right, as is this. This one can come up behind here, and this is correct as well. So the theory was correct. If there's anything that doesn't make sense, then you have to relook at it, but it seems to work each time. The next step, once I know that they're flipped correctly, I want to do this algorithm where I'm not flipping this around. I didn't have to worry about this. I can flip this around any way that I wanted. It didn't matter the rotation here. But I have to hold this steady and only move things around. So what you want to do is you want to look for the one that's in. If you have two that are in and two that are out, well, that's a potential parity situation. It's not really parity. It's a false equivocation, which means an edge that's up here belongs down here. And just flip them if you can and start again. But rarely does that happen for some reason with me. But basically, this is correct, these aren't. So I'm going to hold it like this, because what this algorithm does, the RU, RIU, R2U, RI, keeps this steady while these permute around, these flip around. So RU, RIU, R2U, RI. And I keep doing that until they're all facing correct, and you can see this is in, this is in, this is in, and this is in, and this is rotated appropriately. So the last step, corners. And just to review corners with this, what you do is you see if they're all in. This is red, yellow, and blue, which is here, and you can see this is in. If two are in, then in this particular puzzle, all of them have to be in. If it's not like that, then basically what you do is you see, well, this is correct, and these are not going to be correct. So what you have to do is you have to do the algorithm that holds this steady and rotates these guys around. And that's going to be the U, R, U, I, L, I, U, R, I, U, I, L, which will keep this here and basically rotate these around accordingly. So do it again. And this is actually going to be rotating in a counterclockwise way. So bang, zoom, zoom, pow, pow, splat, kerplop. Rotated it counterclockwise. Now all these are in. Once they're in, once you have that, you really just do RI, DI, RD moves until you can orient these right. So I hold it over here and I just keep wandering around here until all of these are correct. RI, DI, RD, RI, DI, RD. This is correct. Move it across, do the same thing here. Again, this is just review, I know. This is okay here, and through the magic of algorithms, it just seems to work, and that's how you solve beginner's method. Now, I have to apply this to here. Well, this is actually a lot easier than you think. First thing we have to do is put them in the right place. Well, I know that I know where one has to belong. Remember that there was one on this side that had a rotation that was in a clockwise rotation? Well, I've got one here that's going to be in a counterclockwise rotation, which is this. This is going to belong at the area that's doing the counterclockwise rotation. So that's over here. This is rotated counterclockwise, which means that this corner must come over here. As long as I know that, I have a basis of orientation, this must come here. How am I going to get it here? Well, I can't hold it like this because that's going to hold this steady. Can't hold it like this because that's going to hold this steady. So what I'm going to do is hold it like this and do the algorithm until this ends up over here. And because we're rotating in a counterclockwise way, I have to do it twice to get this in here. So bang, zoom, zoom, pow, pow, splat, splat. Do it again. Boom, 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 bang, bang, splat. Okay, so what you see is this is in. So I've got this corner in here. Now we know from the organization of this puzzle that the two that are supposed to go here are actually the same. So in all likelihood, one of them is in, but we don't know if it's correctly oriented between all of these three. So let's take a look at this. Is this where it needs to be? Is this one of the two that could possibly be here? Well, if I were to rotate this, say, in a counterclockwise way, this will come here, and this arrow would rotate counterclockwise, so this would be fine here. This would rotate down, so that'll be fine here, and this will rotate to the right, so that'll be fine here. So this could be here. Is it the right one that goes here? We don't know yet. Maybe this is supposed to be here in organization with the rest of these, or maybe it's okay. The way that it's going to tell me is that if this one belongs here, because you can't say, well, this one belongs here and this one belongs here, therefore I know these two are correct, like I did with this, because I could falsely equivocate this. This one might actually belong here, even though it can belong over here. So this is how you avoid that parity. So let's look at this and see if we can make this make sense. Obviously this shouldn't be here. If I rotate it clockwise, this will come up here and be rotated correctly here. This will be rotated here, and this will be up. So yes, this is where it needs to be. So by necessity, if this is where it needs to be and this is going to be where it needs to be as well. But again, it didn't have to happen that way. It could have happened like this. So let me demonstrate that. Here's another way that this could have happened. Let's say you're looking at that and that's fine. You look at this and this is obviously fine over here. So you're tempted to say, well, this belongs here. But then you look at this place where this might have to go and ask yourself, does this belong here? Well, as I rotate this around, I can't get any of these arrows to face down. You know, if I rotate it clockwise, this will come up here and be in the same direction as this. If I do counterclockwise, this will come up here and be opposite. So even though this can be here, it's not supposed to be here because this isn't supposed to be here, which means that these two are the homologous ones. These two have to occupy these positions. So don't be fooled by the fact that this is where it needs to be. This actually is supposed to be here. So what I do is I do that algorithm. Bang, zoom, zoom, pow, pow, splat, splat. That rotated things counterclockwise. So now this is perfectly fine over here, but this is not fine over here, as we could have predicted in terms of how it turned. And so now we're going to hold it here and do it once more. This is just getting me back to where I was before. Okay, so with that said, We can prove it to ourselves again, but this rotates down, this arrow will face down, this arrow will face this way, and this will face down, so we're good. With this, if I rotate this clockwise, this arrow will come here and face this way, this arrow will come down here and face that way, and this will face up. So I now know for sure that everything is where they need to be. So the next step is to do my RI-DI moves. This is allegedly where it's supposed to be, so I'm going to hold this here, and every one of these are not rotated correctly. So I'm going to do the RI-DI moves until this matches these arrows here. So bang, bang, zoom, zoom, pow, splat, splat, and I'm going to keep going until it's organized where it needs to be, and you can see this is fine. This is up, across, and back. Now I do the same thing with this, and rotate this around until it makes sense here. Just keep track that this is the one that you're looking for. And you can see that this is fine over here. So these all match up over here. Then we turn over here, and this should be the last one, and through the magic of algorithms should be exactly what we need. So, and it's done over here, but uh-oh, what happened? It should have fixed it. I put my faith in the algorithm and it deceived me. It worked for this one, but it didn't work for this one. What am I going to do because this one is already in? Well, bear in mind that just because this is where it needs to be, knowing that every place that I turn this, it's going to be of equal equivalency. So what actually happened is that although this is where it needs to be, this one that's running counterclockwise, it's actually not rotated where it needs to be in relationship to the rest. This actually needs to rotate. You wouldn't know it by looking at it, but that's actually what it needs to do. So when you come across a situation like this, and all these have been rotated in, but it still hasn't fixed it, take your last one over here, and you can rotate this any number of times. It'll always be in the proper position here, but not in the proper position of the rest of the cube. That, in essence, is the fallacy of false equivocation, something that appears as a parity, but is not exactly like the same parity of reduction. So, in other words, this appears like it's fine in this orientation, but it's really not. So go ahead and keep rotating this around until your whole puzzle is solved, and that is the final battle for a lot of people who are confused by this puzzle. So, turn, 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 turn. And you'll find that, well, we're not quite there yet, so let's do it again. Turn, 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 turn. And this is where the faith comes in, because now if you do it enough times, everything is fine here. We'll turn this back to here, and you have, actually we'll turn this where it needs to be here. Doubted myself for a second there. And you have solved your shepherd's cube. Shepherd's cube is now solved. So a very good illustration of different kinds of apparent parities and false equivocations. I would say that it really isn't parity. It's more just a fallacy of false equivocation because of symmetry in rotation of pieces and similarity of different pieces as well, and that's how it can kind of fool you. So I hope that illustrated some of the points of how to get through this. I'd highly recommend getting yourself a 3x3, getting yourself some of these stickers, and making yourself one of these, because it's a nice challenge. All right, thanks for watching.